Welcome to Radical Personal Finance, a show dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, skills, insight, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now while building a plan for financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Joshua Sheaths. I'm your host. Today, I want to give you a report on the second annual Radical Personal Finance Family Camp, and most importantly, tell you what I personally took away from the event, because I myself was quite inspired by the event. Quick little bit of background. Last year in 2024, we hosted the inaugural Radical Personal Finance Family Camp. And this is not something I could have done on my own, but I had a friend and listener of the show who basically said, Joshua, you need to be doing live events and I'm going to help you make it happen. And so he found us a great camp, and he's actually negotiated the contract, put a deposit down himself, and then said, hey, I rented a camp for you and I think you should do an event. And I said, well, you make it too easy. So we had a great event last year. Lots of learning challenges and things, but it was a great event. We had total about 180 people. Well, we had total 180 people attend, and most of the attendees, I think, had a really great time. We had a few logistical challenges just because we didn't know exactly how many people would come, and then we kept on adding space until we ran out of space, and so it was a great event for most people, but I just, from knowing behind the scenes, we had a few logistical challenges, but overall, I think it was really good. And what impressed me the most about that inaugural event was how easily a diverse crowd of people was able to come together. And it seemed like very quickly listeners of this show were able to quickly hit it off with other people, have many things in common, even though coming from a diverse background. The other thing that really impressed me was the very high caliber of listeners who came. I felt so intimidated by just the astonishing stories and success of so many people there in that group, and it was just an honor to be there. So we had a great time the first year, but in preparing for the second year, we weren't exactly sure what to do. And the biggest challenge that I had with the first year, the original event, was, what is the program going to look like? Am I supposed to be doing a bunch of speeches? Do people want to hear from me for a bunch? Do I bring in a bunch of speakers? And so we kind of split a compromise. We tried to bring together a number of speakers. I don't recall exactly how many, 8 to 10, something like that. And then I gave several hours of talks myself at that inaugural event. So in preparing for the second year, we said, well, of course, we want to make things better. And so the first thing we did was, since the first year sold out so quickly, we knew there was a demand for it. So we were able this time to get more facilities. And there's 2 different church camps that actually are part of this facility. And we were able to rent basically both sides of it and the 2 full camps. So we filled up all the spaces this year, and this year we had a total of 270 attendees, which I thought was really great, a good number. They're building one more cabin at the camp, and so I think next year we'll be able to handle about 300, and then that totally maxes out the space. And so I think that'll be a great number. Small enough to be intimate enough to get to know people, especially if you have been to a previous event and you have some connections with people, but yet big enough that there's just a cool diversity of people. So we were pretty happy with that. And then we switched the facilities around this time to kind of fix some of the logistical problems. We brought in a shuttle to make sure that we didn't have people kind of walking this long distance from one camp to the other. So we made a lot of logistical improvements. This year, we felt like we had a good structure for the weekend, but this year I worked hard to bring in more speakers. And so I specifically, after doing a lot of time listening to listeners, I said, the things I hear continually are the desire and the need for community. Most places I go, thoughtful people that I interact with are talking about community in some way, shape, or form. How do we find community? How do we build community? Things related to that. And so I said, let's have a theme all be focused on community. And then the other theme that I wanted to introduce that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but I want to get people talking about, is that of dynasty. I want to get people to be thinking about their legacy, their dynasty. And of course, this is connected to my desire to see people have families and children. I want to see people raise those children effectively. I want to see them build strong families. I believe that's kind of the cornerstone of society. And as a financial planner, what frustrates me is that most of those conversations happen way, way too late. So, you get a guy who's 75 years old who's sitting down with his estate lawyer to draw up his will, and he's got a 50-year-old child, and, well, what am I going to do with all my money when I'm old and dead? And I just think that's frustrating. Why don't we get people at 20 and let's start talking to 20-year-old young men and say, listen, let's be thinking about your dynasty, your legacy. What are you going to build? What kind of family are you going to build? Because everything flows from vision. And without a vision, the people perish. And so we need to be, especially those of us who are getting older, like me, we need to be those who are articulating a vision that is attractive to us, and we need to be articulating that to younger people so that they have more time to fulfill that vision, rather than having some dude pop up at 40 years old and say, well, time to get started, and maybe I'll go ahead and try to figure out what my legacy is going to be. And so I wanted to introduce this theme of dynasty. So that was the twin pillars theme, community and dynasty. I felt like that made a pretty cool conference schedule. So this past year with the second event, we had a total of 19 speakers scheduled, and it wound up being 18. We had a last minute cancellation because one of our speakers had her house flood, unfortunately. But we had a total of 18 speakers, all focused on these topics. And I tried to bring together a diversity of speakers, just a handful of bigger names, people who are well known, and a lot of people from the community. And I thought, because it's nice to bring well-known people, but the problem with well-known people, people who talk for a living and who have big platforms and things like that, is that you can often easily access everything that they've done, everything they have to say. And that's good. That's a good thing. But it means that a lot of times, if you can find just a person from the community who's really interested in something, that person has a lot to share. And that can be so helpful, because if you're listening to somebody who is more or less like you and has found some solutions to some problems that you've had, that can be really, really powerful. I think of it like this. Let's imagine that I'm in 9th grade and I'm totally overwhelmed by school and how hard my 9th grade year is. Yes, I may have a teacher who has a PhD and has spent many years in schooling, and that teacher can give me some very valuable advice about running the academic gauntlet. But sometimes a 10th grader who had a rough time in 9th grade can come alongside me and say, I had a rough time when I was starting my 9th grade year. Here's how I got through it, and here's how I passed, and here are some things that would be useful. And that advice will be so on target that it can be really, really powerful. And so that was my hope in putting together some of the events. And I think we achieved that. We had a really fun mix of things. We sent out our surveys, got reviews back, again, really positive. And so I'm really happy with that. And what we've tried to do with this event is create an event that is very child friendly. So it can be a cool thing for the whole family to get together. Some content, some talks and things like that are going to engage people in thinking of the future, but then lots of time for discussion and casual networking. And what I love about this event, as compared to a lot of the conferences and conventions and things that I go to, is that by using this church camp facility, it allows people to all be together. So I haven't permitted, and I don't intend to permit anybody to attend from off-site. And that certainly limits the number of attendees that we have, because there are people who, more people would come if they could just come on a day pass. More people would come if they could stay at a comfortable hotel rather than being in a rustic the cabin. The cabins are rustic and basic, but perfectly comfortable, perfectly up to standard, just rustic. And so more people would come if they could stay at a nice hotel next door. But it's really important to me to avoid that, because this event is dedicated to a sense of community. And when you have the ability to sit down and know that, hey, my children are off with the camp instructor playing, bow and arrow tag, shooting arrows at their friends, or, they're tucked in bed at the cabin that's 50 yards away, and here I am sitting by the fire till late at night, it lends more towards more of a community dynamic. And that's one thing that I want to encourage, because that's what I hunger for at this stage of life. Just for those who don't know, when you become a parent, you tend to wind up being somewhat isolated from your community due to the exigencies of childcare and just the lifestyle that goes with it. And you wind up not being able to spend as much time with your friends as you would like. You don't wind up being able to stay up late, because if you stay up late and the children stay up late, not only do they fall apart and make everyone else's life difficult, but then the next day is messed up and the following day and things like that. So you wind up going home early so you can put the children to bed. And then you wind up missing out on a lot of the relationships where your single friends or your childless friends, well, they start their night at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, for you as a parent, your children are up at 5 or 6 in the morning. So a 7 a.m. breakfast at the park or breakfast at the beach is ideal, but it doesn't really work. So you kind of just lose. It's challenging to maintain relationships. Or when you maintain relationships, you often maintain them in a single focus. And what I mean by that is, well, if my wife is home with the children and I'm at work, it's pretty easy for me to call somebody and go to lunch. Lunch is fine, but then it's challenging to, how does my wife get included in that? She just gets forgotten about. And then she doesn't have her relationships. But then who's going to watch the children? And so, a number of years ago when I went RVing, the way that we organized our trip was basically I made a long list of all my friends all across the country that I wanted to visit. And then we went and parked the RV in their driveway. And it was amazing. It was so fun because we had young children, they have young children, and so we could just park the RV in the driveway, put all the children to bed, and then we could stay up late into the night talking, which is really, really rewarding at that phase of life. And so it's just one of the challenges of that particular phase of life. So I feel like that the camp experience is really helpful, and it's something that I love, right? My favorite thing about camp, I'm going to talk about what I took away from some of the talks, but my favorite thing about the camps are the late night bonfires, right? Just being able to stay up and have a 4 or 5 hour bonfire every night with just some really smart people is for me a peak experience. I mean, the last night of the camp, I stayed up with a group of men. There was about 12 or 15 of us, and we're smoking cigars and hanging out. And as I was there, we had the most interesting, wide-ranging conversation, and the sheer excellence that was present around the fire, and just the insights was really, really amazing. I really enjoyed that. And that's something that I have on some occasions been able to create at other conferences and kind of business conferences and conventions, but it's really hard because the togetherness is somewhat haphazard. People are staying at all different locations. And, I'm at this hotel, but you're at the hotel across town where it's cheap. And so if we run into each other, it's random. And then if we got a group of people, where are we going to go? So of course I have to rent a private room for us to go to a restaurant. And then that involves a lot of money. And so I really love the environment that we've been able to build with this particular camp facility. Just for those who love relationships, it's a great opportunity to build relationships. I'm really happy with that. I'm not going to go through blow by blow of every single speaker at the camp. We had some, again, as I said, well-known names, and we had some members of the community with names that nobody would recognize because they're not public figures. What I took away from it, though, was, I guess, a couple of things. On the theme of community, I took away, most importantly, the value of practical things. We had a community member named Dale who volunteered and said, I'll be happy to share a presentation on practical family hospitality. Dale and his wife have a bunch of children, and he told me some numbers, like, we have a goal of having this many number of people over this year. And so I said, well, you have some experience. Tell us. What can you do? And he gave this talk that was very well attended. It was standing room only by the end of the talk. And I wasn't able to be there for all of it. But what so impressed me was how simple it is to just engage in practical family hospitality. And that is something that I have been wanting to encourage, something that my wife and we do, something that my parents did, I learned from them. But it's such a simple thing that for whatever reason seems so absent in much of our culture. And I've shared this before, but as I've traveled around, it's just astonishing to me how people have forgotten the value of using the home to provide hospitality. And there's so many things that can be done with a simple thing. At the conference, I gave away a copy of the book, The 2-Hour Cocktail Party by, I forgot his name, Nick. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. But there's this book, 2-Hour Cocktail Party, that I think is just a great structure for young people or anybody. If you want to throw a simple cocktail party, it doesn't matter whether you live in a studio apartment, doesn't matter what room you have, things like that. Learn to throw a quick and simple and really fun cocktail party. We usually will do dinner because people have to eat. And so just the advice and the very practical encouragement of how to do that, how to invite people over, how to create a food choice that makes things simple so that you can enjoy the flow of the evening. These are skills that are eminently learnable and yet so enormously valuable. And so on the topic of community, I felt like that was one of the sessions that was really powerful. And there were a couple others as well, but that was one of the sessions that was really powerful. Then on the topic of dynasty, that was where a lot of my thinking was. I was really engaged in the topic of dynasty. And there were a few speakers that we lined up this day of speakers that was really powerful. And Tim Yarborough, who was on the podcast, was there, and he gave 2 different presentations, one on community, one on dynasty. And the work that he's done just over the course of decades in his local community is so inspiring to me. Here he is this older entrepreneur. I don't know if I assume he's in his 60s, older entrepreneur, and he has mentored hundreds and hundreds of people in his community, and his business investments across those range it's such a powerful vision of a way of approaching the world that is, to me, so much more satisfying than a stupid, Charles Schwab commercial articulates. And I'm still obsessed with this concept and frustrated that I can't share more from my own experience of investing in community and building. But I really, really appreciated his ideas. Then the 2 ideas that really came together were really fascinating. So one of the speakers, Mikkel Thorup from Expat Money, came and he spoke. And he spoke on the topic of building a family office. And this is something that he had gone through the exercise of setting up for his own self a family office structure to manage his wealth. And he's a young man with a young family. And it's such an inspiring ideal to go ahead and have the vision to establish, here's our family culture, here is our family, our environment, here's our values, here's what we're doing. And then he was followed up by Gregory Treat. And Greg Treat was a last-minute addition to the conference. I did not know him. I had not sought him out. But I had a friend of the show who was connected to him and said, hey, I think this guy would be great. And so Greg and I got on the phone and we started talking briefly. I had about a 15, 20-minute conversation with him. I was like, this is great. So I invited him to speak. Then he came on and did a podcast interview, and I was not expecting, I didn't fully understand his business model. When I did that interview, I didn't fully understand what he was doing, what his background was, but it wound up just being such a really good podcast interview, and he's a font of knowledge in areas that I'm really interested in, but relatively ignorant about. And so I'm going to do more podcasts with him. But he gave some presentations at the conference about building, what do I say? I forget what I titled his talks at, but basically about building family businesses, building family culture and building family business, the legal planning and basically the visionary planning. And he used some public examples of different people at the talk that was just so inspiring to me to see what could be done. And it's something that expresses an element that I hunger for, that I want to see, of basically the family unit being the foundation of society and people working together. And what's been fascinating is just to think about, why did we lose that that vision, that model, and that practice. Now, there's a whole bunch of really interesting, thorny challenges of our modern day with this. So I have a private group for all conference attendees, and it's been one of the most fun places that I participate in online, because it's open to anybody who's come to family camp. But now I'm interacting with people that I know from a diverse background, and we're interacting on serious and interesting topics. And so we've kind of worked through and continue to think through, how do you build this? Where are the lines? How do you build this? But when I think about building a family business and a family empire that supports young family members and expands outward and impacts the world in a positive way, I found it so inspiring. So I've been working on a lot of the details of, what do I do? What do I implement? And I think that way of lifting our thinking towards dynasty is really, I want to be more involved in that. One of the themes that I've been super interested in, that I want to take a lot of my content, is to the topic of philanthropy. This is a topic that is famously difficult, and yet I want to learn more about what to do so that we can do it better. We can engage in philanthropy better. And I see these things as related. This idea of personal dynasty, which is not philanthropy, but it's more about building a family with a mission, and rather than fractured people that kind of randomly live together for 18 years and then fracture across. And there's a lot to it. I'm trying to not stumble and stammer, but I'm also trying not to articulate all of the content from the talks, because there's so much that can be said about it. But to me, this is something that if the vision is there, then the practical techniques of how to put it in place will come in. And it's pretty neat. Greg's a lawyer, and he specializes in basically the legal structures that incentivize this. And it's a whole realm of estate planning and business planning that I have never been exposed to legally. So much, I'm a little scandalized, so much of my knowledge of estate planning and business planning has never been done with anything like this vision. It's all just, how do we pay less taxes, which is clearly important, obviously, but it's just very thin and not rich and engaging in terms of a mission. It's just more money. But kind of bringing these together and then recognizing, I gave a very short, I gave a very short, it was going to be a talk, but I canceled it because we had too many other speakers. But I was going to give this kind of closing vision. One of the things that's interesting to me, when I doodle around on my financial calculator, what I have discovered is that almost anybody can build an enormous financial legacy if he has a reason to. And basically, it just involves non-retirement. So if you are somebody who has a plan and you've got it all worked out to say, all right, I'm going to retire at 60 and I'm going to have $4 million, and that's going to be what I need to provide me with, this amount of information, blah, blah, blah. What's interesting is if you're just willing to change the details a little bit, and you say, all right, here's what I'm going to do. Instead of retiring at 60, I'm going to retire at 70. But from 60 to 70, every dollar I earn or every dollar I save is going to be oriented towards my heirs, towards, of course, supporting them financially now, which is a theme that I return to again and again, but also just in terms of growing a nest egg, growing a trust that will be there for the family trust. You can wind up with that kind of thinking with tens of millions of dollars under relatively ordinary assumptions. And so many of us will have the opportunity with the vision to create a $20 million, $30 million, $50 million family trust that can serve as the foundation for the family culture that expands. But the money is not enough. It's not enough just to have the money in the trust. You've got to, first of all, have the family members, which means you got to have the children when you're young and able to do so when you're probably broke and you're probably stressing out and you're probably saying, well, how on earth do I afford all these children? So you've got to have them at that point in life. Then you've got to build the kind of family dynamic and family relationships where your children love one another and you love them and they love you, which that takes a lot of work and a lot of time. Then, of course, you have to see them transition into stability. And you've got to basically do all this years before you're capable for it. So that's where kind of there's this balance between the money and the work. The money is necessary as a component of it, but it's not sufficient. And over the years, I've sadly done a good amount of financial planning for so many clients in that situation where they have millions of dollars, but the children don't share their values. The children don't share their culture. And so it's just money. And okay, well, I'm going to give it to my children. And that's an honorable thing to do, but it doesn't have the benefit. Then the flip side is, of course, there are some people who have the family culture, but they never solved the money problem. But if you bring these together, then how powerful this can be, how amazing this can be. And I think this is the kind of life that certainly not everybody would aspire to, but it seems to me like most people would aspire to this as compared to the standard model. And that was what was so neat. And then Jesse Augenbaugh talked about rites of passage. We talked about more legal planning. There's just so many talks that were there that were really engaging and that I really enjoyed. So I was very inspired by the event, and I'm really happy about that. I haven't figured out what the theme will be for next year, but I'm working on it. I'm close to it. So I haven't decided what the theme will be for next year. We've gotten a lot better in the last year, and then as I spent some time talking with Andy about the details, we went over all of our lessons learned, and we improved a lot this year. And even just after this last year, as we did our after action review, we've got a bunch more things that we can improve for next year. So it's going to be simpler, more straightforward. There's a lot that we can do. So I'm pretty excited about it. We will do it again next year. I don't have the specific dates. So what I would say is look out around, probably somewhere around January. I will probably launch next year's event in January. What works the best is springtime, and this is in Indiana. So we were so blessed with good weather this year. Last year we had one day of rain and the rest was good weather. So it's not perfect, right? I'd love to do it a month later, but the problem is the facility is not available later in the summer because they're full of children at all the youth groups and things that they host. So on that shoulder season of spring, we can have access to the facility that really enables the whole thing. So it'll probably be April next year as well. This year, 60% of our attendees had come to the first event. So, I hope that it continues to sell out quickly. So keep your ears open, keep your eye on your email inbox, all that kind of stuff when we launch it next year. But that's just a report. That's what I learned. I will, of course, continue to bring more of the content here to the podcast, the stuff that I'm interested in, and I hope that you are interested in as well. And I believe that this is an area that is dramatically underserved in the world of financial planning. So I hope that I can start to serve that because it is a desire. I want to see it spread. That's a report on Family Camp. I hope that you will come to the next one. I have loved hanging out with you, my listener, and so I hope that you will come next time and join us whenever we announce that in 2026.